This week, we begin a new cycle of reading the Torah. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Everything is fresh, everything is pristine. God creates a world, and in a final act of creation, God creates man to work and to perfect this imperfect world. Adam is given one rule to adhere to, just one. From all the trees in the garden you can eat except for one. Do not eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge between good and bad. Eitz hadas tov v'ra. Before the Torah tells us how they sin and eat from the tree, the Torah in chapter 2, verse 25, makes it a point to mention that both Adam and his wife Eve were living their life totally naked. They had no clothes and there was no bashfulness. The concept of covering one's body did not yet enter into consciousness. There was no ability given to discern between good and evil. But after they sin and eat from the tree of knowledge, they are given the ability to differentiate between good and evil. Naturally, the first thing they realize is the fact that they are naked in public and should cover up. And that's exactly what they do. As the Torah teaches in chapter 3, verse 7, "Vatipakachna einei shneim vayedu ke'einu mimhem." And the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves and made themselves girdles. From that moment in history until today, the human being naturally knows the concept of modesty, of covering our nakedness. Much has been written on this subject of modesty, and there are many misunderstandings to our Jewish way of modesty. One misunderstanding is that modest dress is something only for women and not for men. Another misunderstanding is that it is fear-driven. There is something evil about the body, that it needs to be covered and hidden. But the truth is just the opposite. Covering something doesn't always mean you're afraid of it or ashamed of it. If you walk into any synagogue in the world and you ask, what is the holiest part of the synagogue? They will point you to the ark. And if you ask, why is that the holiest place? You will be told because it houses the Torah scrolls. And where are the Torah scrolls? If they are so holy, shouldn't they be hanging from the walls? Shouldn't they be seen by everyone at all times? After all, don't we come here for its increased holiness? And yet, the Torah is in the ark, behind the door, behind a curtain, dressed in a robe, girded by a nice belt. And we only take it out to read, and as soon as we are done, we put back on its clothes and bring it back to its concealed location in the ark. Why are we hiding it? Are we afraid of it? Are we embarrassed by it? What's so unattractive about the Torah that it needs so many layers of covering? The answer, my friends, is that because it's so holy, we don't want to expose it. Because it's so special, we don't want to take it lightly. We expose what we need when we need it, and then we return our most precious article of holiness back to its modest home in the ark. Were the Torah scroll to be left open and bare at all times, were it to lie on the table like any other book or scroll, always visible, its sanctity would be minimized. Its true holiness unable to be appreciated. It's precisely because it's our most precious item that we keep it away from sight and only bring it out when appropriate to do so. This is how we maintain our respect for the Torah. And the same is true with our most precious item in life that we have, our bodies. There's nothing more precious to us. It itself is most holy, and it is the home to our sacred soul. We keep it covered to maintain its proper respect. Because of its beauty and preciousness, we don't want to expose it more than necessary. Later on in our parsha, we read about how the generations were degenerating. In particular, the Torah mentions a man named Lamech and how he married two women, one named Oda and one named Tzila. Rashi asks the question, why does the Torah mention this seemingly irrelevant fact? Of what significance is it who Lamech married? And Rashi explains the reason the Torah is teaching us the evil ways of Lamech and the generations that preceded the flood. By Lamech's time, society had morally degenerated to the point that men were objectifying female beauty and depersonalizing women. It became customary for men to marry one woman for her beauty and a second woman for the purpose of procreation. The first wife would be given a contraceptive so that pregnancy and childbirth not mar her appearance. The husband would spend his time chiefly with her, ignoring his second wife. Needless to say, this objectification of women goes against God's intention. God created the world in such a way that all relationships consist of someone or something acting as a giver and someone or something else acting as the receiver. Both have to take the other into consideration. Lamech and his unholy ways served as the catalyst for the great flood. They were terrible sinners. Today we have the luxury to be able to learn from our history. We understand today more than ever the need for modest clothing, modest language, and modest behavior. In a world where the body has been reduced to a cheap advertising gimmick, we need no proof for the truth of this wisdom. Where all is exposed, nothing is sacred. But that which is truly precious to us, we keep under wraps. For some, this concept is more challenging than for others. But the more difficult it is to keep it under wraps, the likely indication is that the more precious your body is, the more precious your soul is. Let's give it the proper respect that it deserves. I wish you a good Shabbos.